Triggers hiding in plain sight. When people think about what sparks depersonalization or derealization, the images are usually of overwhelming moments, a major trauma, a sudden loss, or a life-threatening event. Those experiences can absolutely open the door to dissociation, but research makes it clear that they aren't the only catalysts. Episodes can appear in situations that look far more ordinary. The nervous system monitors stress at a level most of us don't consciously notice, and its threshold for pulling the disconnect lever doesn't always require catastrophe. The strongest and most consistent link in research is with trauma, particularly during childhood. Interpersonal trauma, especially emotional abuse or neglect, shows one of the clearest associations. Prevalence rates of depersonalization-Derealization disorder in groups with that history are dramatically higher, with studies reporting rates between 25% and 54%. That difference alone shows how early relational stress can calibrate the brain toward dissociation. Not every person with such history develops the disorder, but the numbers demonstrate that trauma isn't just one possible contributor. It's a powerful risk factor that sets sensitivity much lower. That said, a wide range of less dramatic situations can also act as triggers, often surprising those who experience them. What looks routine from the outside can load the nervous system past its capacity from the inside. The main categories tend to cluster around 4 areas: intense stress, sleep disruption, sensory overload, and substance use. Each can nudge the system into detachment, especially when someone already leans toward that response style. Stress is perhaps the most straightforward. It can take many forms: the aftermath of a heated argument, the build-up to a difficult exam, or cumulative pressure at work. The nervous system floods under tension, spikes in hormones like cortisol increase arousal, and while most people return to baseline afterwards, some don't. Instead of calm, their body flips into protective detachment, watching their own hands move without ownership, or staring at a room that suddenly looks drained of depth. Sleep is another powerful contributor. Even one night of poor rest, a work shift running too late, staying up to study, or simply losing track of time on a device can destabilize the pathways that keep perception, memory, and awareness integrated. Fatigue fogs the brain, and for some, that fog collapses into an episode where their sense of presence seems to fracture. What others mistake for just being tired is, for them, a vector into feeling estranged from themselves or the world around them. Overstimulation operates differently but lands in a similar place. Crowded trains, pulsing concerts, or the non-stop layering of notifications and obligations can shove the sensory system past its limit. Instead of drowning in noise, the nervous system abruptly dulls input. Suddenly, voices sound distant even when they're loud, or a street scene looks like a set flattened of dimension. It isn't a conscious choice. The system shifts gears to stop further strain. And then there are substances, with cannabis the one most often tied to episodes in clinical reports and anecdotal accounts alike. Cannabis alters time perception and intensifies bodily awareness, which for vulnerable people can be enough to trip the threshold into derealization or depersonalization. A session that feels mild for one user can unfold into a long detachment for another. Alcohol and other substances can also play a role, but cannabis comes up most consistently as a factor that can both precipitate and prolong episodes. In real life, these triggers don't stand alone. They often converge. A student juggling arguments at home, little sleep, heavy caffeine, and a glowing screen for hours might find that the simple act of sitting down for an exam suddenly pulls them into unreality. Another person binge streaming shows into the early morning stands up groggy, only to discover that their own voice feels mechanical and their bedroom curiously artificial. None of the ingredients seem extreme in isolation, but aligned together, they nudge the nervous system toward detachment. Driving long distances can illustrate the same principle. Monotony collides with vigilance. Long stretches of road demand attention but offer little novelty. Add sleep debt and stress, and some drivers describe flipping into an observer state, watching themselves steer while feeling oddly absent. Instead of absent-minded daydreaming, this is dissociation, the body carrying on while the sense of control thins. A useful way to think about these episodes is through sensitivity thresholds. Not everyone's nervous system has the same tipping point. For some individuals, it might take catastrophic trauma to flip into detachment. For others, smaller stresses accumulate and cross that threshold. Biology, past experiences, and current stress levels all shape where that line sits. Two people in the same classroom or same office may face identical pressures. One just feels drained, while the other stares as the scene tilts into dreamlike detachment. Neither response is a weakness, but rather a difference in calibration. Here's the key idea to hold on to. Small triggers can add up, sensitivity thresholds vary. For some people, minor stressors push the system into detachment. Understanding this opens practical doors. Once someone notices that stressful arguments, poor sleep, specific substances, or overstimulating environments tend to spark episodes, they gain a foothold. Researchers note that the simple act of tracking symptoms against daily conditions can help. Keeping a record, logging nights of little sleep, recording substance use, or noting when detachment follows heavy screen time, transforms the pattern from a mystery into a readable sequence. That knowledge doesn't prevent every episode, but it sharpens awareness of cause and effect. In turn, it reduces the sense that dissociation arrives out of nowhere, shifting it from random to somewhat predictable. That predictability also matters for reducing fear. Someone who knows that fatigue plays a role can remind themselves during an episode, "This is connected to my sleep," instead of spiraling into catastrophic interpretations. That reframe alone often lowers panic and makes space for grounding strategies. With practice, self-monitoring becomes the first line of management, just as people with panic or migraine learn to track their own triggers. Societal perception changes here too. Many believe dissociation always follows dramatic trauma, and while trauma is indeed one of the strongest risk factors, focusing only on it leaves those who detach in ordinary contexts feeling dismissed. Recognizing both the trauma pathway and the everyday triggers broadens understanding. It shows dissociation not as a binary, trauma or nothing, but as a spectrum of vulnerability where ordinary pressures can still strike heavily in some nervous systems. All of this leaves one more puzzle. If the brain can react this way even to minor stress, why does it sometimes choose to detach rather than switch on panic? Turning down reality seems like a strange protective choice, and yet the evidence suggests that is exactly what happens. To understand why, you have to look at how the brain weighs its options when stress rises. Why the brain picks disconnect instead of fight or flight. Faced with rising stress, the brain does not always surge into panic. Sometimes it takes the opposite path, numbing and disconnecting instead of unleashing fight or flight. To an outside observer, this can look calm or even composed, but inside the person feels strangely absent, cut off from the rush of emotion that usually signals urgency. This paradox, clarity without presence, alertness without grounding, sits at the heart of depersonalization and derealization. The well-known survival reaction floods the body with adrenaline, narrows vision, and primes muscles for action when danger is near. But in dissociative episodes, the experience flips. Instead of emotions exploding, they flatten. Instead of a heart racing with alarm, there can be an eerie sense of detachment. Neuroscience frames this not as random failure, but as a different tuning of the same circuitry. Specifically, it reflects frontal overregulation that inhibits limbic activity, producing emotional numbing, a pattern seen in neuroimaging studies of dissociation. Stress systems are layered rather than simple switches. In ordinary threats, like a car swerving too close in traffic, the amygdala and related limbic regions generate rapid fear, while the prefrontal cortex helps regulate and channel those impulses. Together they produce the sharp urgency we call fight or flight. During dissociation, however, the balance alters. Prefrontal regions maintain high activity, suppressing limbic responses before emotions can flood the body. The result feels hollow, clear awareness of what's happening but stripped of resonance. You see the scene, but you don't feel it as yours. Why would the nervous system do this? The most plausible answer is overload prevention. When stress passes a threshold, a full panic could be destabilizing or even dangerous. Instead of allowing fear to peak, the system reduces emotional amplification. It is like lowering the volume before the speakers blow out. In doing so, you avoid drowning in distress, but lose the sense of connection that usually grounds experience. Movements seem robotic, voices sound unfamiliar, the world looks staged. Function remains, but presence erodes. This trade-off is costly. By blunting emotion, the brain shields against being overwhelmed, yet it also strips away reality's texture. Imagine being at a concert where the music grows unbearably loud. Covering your ears protects you from pain, but it also makes the sound flat and distant. Dissociation works the same way, a protective barrier that quiets sensation but distorts everything else. And sometimes, the barrier lingers even after the noise is gone. Evolution provides the context for this strategy. Fight or flight is not the only survival pattern. Animals also freeze or play dead under certain conditions. Numbing pain or disconnecting awareness helps prey animals endure capture or frightening restraint. Humans inherited those ancient responses, and dissociation is their psychological extension. It functions as an emergency brake, an option designed to keep the organism alive under extreme circumstances. The problem is that the brake can be pulled in moments that don't warrant it: arguments, fatigue, or everyday stresses. A system meant for extremes ends up firing in ordinary life. Importantly, this emergency brake does not mute everything. Many people say they can still think logically, sometimes even more sharply during an episode. They know what's happening, sometimes analyzing it in real time, but they cannot feel it. This striking mismatch, intact reasoning paired with absent emotional grounding, lines up with the imaging research. Executive control areas remain active while the limbic system stays quiet. Persistence of that imbalance explains why the state can feel frozen, difficult to exit even when the trigger ends. Once engaged, the system can lock in, creating a self-maintaining loop. This sticking point matters because it helps explain chronicity. If the protective dampening system misfires too often, the nervous system learns it as a default pathway. Instead of releasing the brake, it keeps it pressed halfway down. Over time, dissociation becomes the go-to response even to moderate stress. Research notes that once this regulation pattern sets in, it is hard to reverse quickly. The same circuits that prevent overload stall their own reset, leaving the person caught between awareness and absence. Seeing dissociation through this lens changes how we interpret it. Instead of imagining something broken, it becomes the overuse of a tool meant for survival. Like anesthesia appropriate for surgery but extreme for a minor injury, numbing is helpful in rare emergencies but disrupts ordinary functioning when triggered repeatedly. The brain does not fail, it overprotects. And by overprotecting, it sacrifices the very qualities, connection, ownership, emotional resonance, that make experience feel genuinely lived. This explains the paradox many describe, fully present in one sense but completely absent in another. The body hears, sees, and moves, but the weight and immediacy of those signals are lost. It is as though reality continues at arm's length, visible but untouchable. Such accounts are not exaggerated. They echo what neurobiology confirms about mismatched brain activity. And here lies the most important reassurance. Dissociation is not evidence of psychosis, nor is it a sign of permanent brain damage. Research emphasizes that it is an adaptive response taken too far, not a collapse into madness. Panic often worsens disconnection, but understanding it as protective brakes overapplied can interrupt that spiral of fear. Recognizing that the brain is helping badly, rather than braking, helps many people endure episodes with less additional anxiety. So why does the brain sometimes choose disconnect instead of arousal? Because at certain points it decides that muting is safer than flooding. That choice avoids panic, but at the cost of grounding. When repeated, it becomes a habit, a safeguard overstaying its usefulness, tilting ordinary life into unreality. It is not a glitch so much as the overextension of a defense mechanism. Knowing this shifts the perspective. Instead of seeing dissociation as a permanent fracture, you can see it as a state that can be interrupted and eased. The protective reflex is strong, but not unchangeable. The fact that the brain can shift into disconnection means it can also shift back, if given the right cues. Next, we'll cover practical ways to interrupt this protective overreaction. Practical coping tools you can start using today. When unreality takes hold, it's easy to feel like there's nothing you can do until the state passes on its own. But research points to small, practical coping tools that can help soften episodes and shorten their duration. They don't erase depersonalization or derealization instantly, but they give you leverage, especially when used consistently. Reviews of clinical protocols note that grounding techniques, paced breathing, simple movement exercises, and external orientation strategies all have empirical support for reducing the intensity of dissociative symptoms. What matters most is learning a handful of reliable actions you can repeat when things feel unreal. The first tool is tactile grounding. When detachment creeps in, your mind feels foggy and untethered. Physical sensations can cut through that fog because they provide information the brain can't debate. Holding a cold object, pressing your feet firmly into the floor, or running your hands underwater anchors awareness with undeniable input. The nervous system receives a sharp, real-time signal that says this is happening right now, which interrupts spirals of unreality. A second reliable tool is paced breathing. During episodes, breathing often becomes shallow and automatic, which reinforces the sense of watching from a distance rather than living in the moment. A structured pattern such as inhaling through the nose for 4 seconds, holding briefly, then exhaling through the mouth for 7 or 8 seconds directly activates calming pathways. Clinical reviews show these techniques reduce arousal and increase regulation, making the body feel reconnected rather than detached. Even a short series of breaths can shift awareness back toward presence. Movement helps too, particularly when depersonalization makes your own body feel foreign. Small, deliberate actions, clenching and unclenching fists, stretching arms, even doing a few squats, reset the sense of agency. The body moves, the brain registers it, and the loop reinforces ownership. I did that. Over time, repeating intentional movements reclaims space from dissociation, proving to yourself that you're still participating in what happens, even while the episode runs in the background. The fourth tool is external orientation. When derealization makes the environment look staged or artificial, the natural instinct is to retreat inward and worry, which makes the distortion stronger. Instead, turn outward deliberately. A simple version is naming objects aloud. This is a desk, this is a cup, this is a clock. It's not about convincing yourself of reality logically. You already know the world hasn't vanished. It's about relinking perception with recognition. That act of naming pulls the brain's interpretive circuits back into gear, stitching sensory impressions together with meaning. Taken together, these strategies form a simple, repeatable sequence you can carry with you. A compact version could be: press both feet into the ground, hold something cold for 10 seconds, breathe in for 4 and out for 7, then name 3 things in the room. Practiced as a single flow, this routine gives the nervous system multiple prompts at once: tactile confirmation, physiological calming, motor feedback, and external orientation. Each stage tugs against detachment, and together they increase the chance of breaking its momentum. Consistency matters as much as the technique itself. Research emphasizes that practicing grounding and regulation outside of episodes strengthens the circuits you'll need later. It may feel odd to rehearse strategies when you already feel fine, but rehearsal makes them more automatic under stress. It works the way a fire drill works. By practicing in calm moments, the body knows what to do in emergencies without hesitation. Over time, this repetition increases resilience, making each future dissociative state easier to ease. Framing these tools as skills, not last-ditch rescues, changes their value. Each time you press your feet into the floor, regulate a round of breathing, clench your fists deliberately, or name objects around you, you demonstrate to the nervous system that presence can be re-established. The episode may not vanish, but its edges soften. Importantly, this reduces fear, and fear is often the fuel that magnifies dissociation. Regaining even partial control shifts the role from passive target to active participant. Daily habits can increase the effectiveness of coping strategies too. Simple self-care steps, regular sleep schedules, balanced nutrition, time away from screens, physical exercise provide a stronger baseline. Dissociation arises more easily when the body is under strain or running short on resources. A steadier baseline means fewer triggers stacking up, so episodes are less frequent and somewhat easier to contain. While lifestyle adjustments won't eliminate symptoms, they reduce the likelihood of the protective system overreacting. Flexibility also matters. Not every technique works the same for everyone. Some people feel immediate relief with sensory grounding but find paced breathing awkward, while others respond strongly to movement and dislike naming objects. The goal isn't to follow a rigid checklist, but to experiment, adapt, and keep the tools that resonate personally. The shared feature is that all these techniques signal safety to the nervous system. When safety is reinforced, detachment loses its grip. Even adopting 1 or 2 of these actions can shift how episodes unfold. Instead of drifting helplessly until they pass, you have anchors, sensory inputs, controlled breath, physical movement, external naming. Layering them builds strength, providing several entry points for regaining presence. The more consistently they are practiced, the more readily the body accesses them when dissociation strikes. Over time, this transforms the experience from uncontrollable fog into something with steps and structure. Recognizing these strategies as part of evidence-supported protocols makes them more than distractions. Grounding, paced breathing, and orientation cues are standard elements in therapeutic interventions for dissociation, and reviews show they reliably lessen the intensity of symptoms. They don't replace professional care, but they give practical tools you can use right now, combining immediate relief with long-term conditioning. And while these steps won't cure depersonalization or derealization outright, they provide a concrete sense of agency. You may not end every episode instantly, but you can shorten its reach, reclaim signals from your own body, and feel steadier in your environment. That shift from total helplessness to partial control is often the difference between spiraling fear and manageable discomfort. It creates space to continue with daily life rather than freezing inside unreality. Ultimately, coping tools work best as part of a broader approach. They handle the immediate intensity, but they build a foundation for the kinds of longer-term strategies people explore with professional guidance. The practical exercises here make episodes less overwhelming, giving you room to take the next steps without feeling engulfed. And that raises a larger question. If small daily techniques can offer relief, what options exist when you're looking for more structured forms of treatment backed by clinical research? Treatment approaches backed by science. For many years, people living with depersonalization or derealization disorder found that the treatment picture looked narrow and discouraging. Standard medications that worked well for depression, anxiety, or psychosis often failed to make more than a small dent. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers were tried, but in larger samples, they offered little relief beyond scattered partial improvements. This history created a tension. On the one hand, the condition was widespread and deeply distressing, but on the other, clinicians lacked targeted tools. Patients often walked away from therapy hearing that their symptoms were hard to treat, which left both sides frustrated. In recent years, however, the landscape has shifted. Researchers and clinicians increasingly view depersonalization-derealization not as a condition that floats alone, but as part of broader stress and trauma responses. This shift has steered treatment towards psychotherapy as the mainstay, with adaptations designed specifically for dissociation rather than borrowed wholesale from other conditions. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, has been tailored so it goes beyond challenging distorted thinking. These variations target the feedback loop where fear of symptoms, "what if I'm losing my mind?" actually strengthens those same symptoms. Practical steps include teaching patients to recognize those fears, interrupt them, and respond with different behaviors, reducing the intensity and duration of episodes. Among currently available approaches, CBT-style interventions carry some of the strongest support, even though effectiveness can vary across individuals. Therapies oriented around trauma also play a central role. Since overwhelming stress is often at the root of dissociation, many clinicians emphasize the creation of safety, bodily presence, and calm within sessions. Instead of relying purely on analysis and conversation, therapists may help clients weave in grounding, movement, or structured relaxation during treatment itself. For people whose symptoms are linked with early interpersonal trauma, methods such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or somatic therapies sometimes add an extra layer of benefit. While the evidence is still developing, preliminary studies suggest that these trauma-informed practices can be especially useful in cases where traditional talk therapy has limited impact. On top of psychotherapy, lifestyle adjustments often become a quiet but powerful foundation. Symptoms rarely vanish by improving sleep, nutrition, or exercise alone, but these habits raise the threshold before the nervous system tips into detachment. Sleep regularity is particularly critical. Episodes often flare after consecutive nights of poor rest. Exercise helps as well, not because it directly erases dissociation, but because it reduces stress hormones and strengthens pathways that support attention and bodily presence. Additions such as hydration, balanced nutrition, or limiting caffeine and alcohol provide stability that makes other interventions more effective. Without this baseline, more specialized treatments often fail to take hold. Medication does still have a role, though not usually as a treatment for dissociation itself. Clinical reviews show limited evidence for medications directly alleviating core symptoms. Instead, medications are often prescribed for comorbid issues like anxiety or depression. Since depersonalization often overlaps with both, this can help reduce the burden of secondary symptoms, making it easier to benefit from therapy. At the same time, researchers note that when dissociation is unrecognized in a broader clinical profile, patients may appear treatment-resistant. This underscores why accurate diagnosis and tailored care matter. Mislabeling symptoms as pure depression or panic disorder can lead to repeated trial and error with little success. Beyond these approaches, some labs have started investigating neurological interventions. Repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, RTMS, and transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS, rely on altering brain activity through targeted stimulation. Early pilot trials have shown promise, particularly when applied to regions thought to be under or overactive in dissociation, yet the evidence is not firm. Sample sizes in these studies are small, and benefits can fade outside of controlled trials. As reviews emphasize, some brain stimulation studies, RTMS-TDCS, have shown promising results in very small trials, but larger randomized trials are still needed. These methods remain experimental, worth watching, but not ready for widespread use. Another experimental approach is neurofeedback, in which participants use real-time displays of brain activity to try to retrain networks toward more stable patterns. For dissociation, the hope is that reinforcing stronger connectivity between self-perception regions might reduce symptoms. So far, results are preliminary and limited to small exploratory studies. It represents one of several attempts to design novel interventions aligned with dissociation's neurobiology, but like brain stimulation, it cannot yet be considered a reliable treatment. Looking across these options highlights an important conclusion. Psychotherapy remains the most established and practical starting point. Tailored CBT, trauma-informed therapies, and grounding strategies integrated with lifestyle habits currently hold the strongest combination of clinical support and accessibility. Medications typically target accompanying anxiety or depression, while experimental neurological approaches serve as future possibilities rather than current standards. That balance matters for patients weighing what to try first. The most realistic plan usually blends several strategies, core therapy, supportive habits, and adjunctive treatments for comorbid symptoms. When customized, this mix can significantly improve day-to-day functioning, shorten episodes, and reduce fear of symptoms. While complete remission is rare, progress is meaningful. More time spent grounded, less time lost to fog. Research confirms what people report anecdotally. Living with depersonalization or derealization can become far more manageable with the right supports in place. Just as important, momentum in awareness has made tailored care more available. Clinics that once overlooked dissociation are now beginning to address it directly. Therapy manuals include sections on managing depersonalization and derealization, and more therapists are trained in trauma-informed frameworks that make them sensitive to dissociative experiences. For someone seeking help, the key point is that not all clinicians are equally familiar with these symptoms, so seeking out professionals with direct experience, trauma-informed therapists, or clinics that specialize in dissociation can make a substantial difference. Clinician familiarity not only reduces misdiagnosis, but also increases the odds of treatment success. It is essential to keep expectations balanced. The science is improving, but there are still clear limits. Much of the evidence rests on small samples and short-term studies. For some people, benefits from brain stimulation or EMDR are striking but incomplete. For others, even careful therapy yields only gradual results. It is better to think in terms of progress and management rather than binary cure. Even partial symptom reduction can mean preserved work routines, more steady relationships, and less intrusive fear. That quality of life relief matters just as much as the disappearance of symptoms. The broader context is encouraging. What once felt like a neglected condition is increasingly recognized across research, clinical practice, and public conversation. The treatment map may still have large gaps, but it no longer leaves patients without direction. Focused psychotherapy, integrated with healthy routines and adjusted for comorbid challenges, provides a set of tools that work across many cases. Around those core strategies, emerging methods continue to push the field toward more precise answers. Taken together, the picture is one of cautious optimism. There is no single cure, but there are ways forward. Patients and clinicians have better tools than they did a generation ago, and more are being explored. That progress puts people in a stronger position to move beyond fear and find stability, even if complete remission remains rare.